some people will be joining in, as we go along. My name is Amir Shabar. I'm the chair of the Toronto Center of CMOS. And today we have a webinar from a very young scientist by the name of Artash Nath. He's a grade 10 high school student in Toronto. He's a founder of the Monitor My Ocean project that measures anthropogenic underwater noise in global ocean using open data. The project received many awards in 2022, including the EU Youth for Ocean Award, Grand Award at the International Science and Engineering Fair, and the Canadian Meteorological and Oceanographic Society Award. He's invited to attend the 2022 UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon. Most recently, Artash website, which is monitormyocean.com, was endorsed by the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Society Commission, IOC of UNESCO, as the UN Decade activity. Artash is passionate about using technology for the good of the society and is an inaugural RISE Fellow of Schmidt Future and Rhodes Trust. So if you have questions as we go along, please put your question in the chat, and then towards the end of the seminar, we will answer, or I'll ask the question to Artash, and he will answer those questions for you. So at this point, Artash, is all yours.
Thank you. Awesome. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you, Amir, for that great introduction. And thank you to CMOS for inviting me to give this webinar today. So I'm very happy to be talking to all of you on my research on ocean acoustics, specifically on the contribution of human activities like shipping and tourism on underwater noise levels, including my most recent case study on how noise decreased during the COVID-19 pandemic. So as mentioned, I'm a student from Toronto. Now, many of you may know that on the surface, the ocean is calm in some places. However, if you go deep into the ocean, it's actually very noisy. And since light does not penetrate below 200 meters in the ocean, sound becomes the most important factor when thinking of oceans. There are three main types of noises that can be heard underwater. First is geophony, and these are the natural sounds of the earth. And this can include rain, the breaking of waves, and seismic activity. Then is biophony, and these are the natural sounds from different marine mammals, like cetaceans such as whales, dolphins, fishes, and even aquatic plants. And finally, there's anthrophony, and this is the artificially induced noise from human activity, like commercial shipping and offshore oil exploration to underwater sound. Now, what my research focuses on is the last of those three items, the anthropogenic noise. Now, because of consumer trade and globalization, international trade is rising each year. And some of you may know that over 80% of global trade happens via marine shipping routes. In fact, in the last 20 years, the amount of cargo transported by shipping has nearly doubled, so much so that at the moment, there are always around 60,000 commercial ships in the oceans at all times. However, the propellers and machinery aboard these ships produce underwater noise in the lower frequencies. And this noise overlaps with the sounds that marine mammals use for understanding their environment, for communication, for organizing hunting activities with other of the marine mammals. So this increase in ocean noise is causing stress on the marine mammal ecosystem and is causing loss of hearing among these marine mammals, which can have detrimental effects on their populations. Let's have a bit of a closer look at the different sources of sounds underwater and what frequencies they like. Between 0 to 10 hertz, there's sound from geophony, or the natural sounds like seismic activity. Between 10 to 100 hertz, the noise which I'm interested in, which is shipping noise, is dominant. And then above 100 hertz, other sounds from wind and bubbles in the water also start to affect the underwater sound. All of these studies is visualized as the Wenz curve, as you can see. Now, I wanted to be able to measure the effect that human activity, like shipping and tourism, has on the underwater noise levels. However, it is very hard to establish a baseline for this data because noise keeps rising each year. So it's very hard to find a period where there's almost no noise. However, in 2020, a rare research opportunity presented itself with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic was a tragedy, but it was also a research opportunity as it led to a complete slowdown in marine trade. As you can see on the graph on the left, trade from all countries starting in China and followed by other countries collapsed completely. And so did marine traffic as shown on the bottom. So this was a rare opportunity to be able to measure the underwater noises during the COVID-19 pandemic. How did I measure these underwater noise levels? Well, I turned to hydrophones. Hydrophones are nothing but underwater microphones, and they can measure underwater sounds with great precision. So I needed to choose which hydrophones to use in my research. So I came up with 4 criteria. First, the hydrophone should be located near all the different oceanic regions to get a good global representation. Since there is only one ocean, and ocean noise is a global issue. Second, all these stations should be located close to sources of human activity, whether that be shipping traffic or tourism. 3, they should be operational before and during the COVID-19 lockdown period, so I could make a comparison. And finally, the data from these hydrophones should be open and not used for military purposes. So I ended up finding 7 hydrophones located all around the globe, as you can see on the map. They're located near 4 different countries: Canada, US, Spain, and New Zealand. And a big thank you to Mbari, Ocean Networks Canada, the NOAA, OPSI, and Ocean Acoustics for providing the underwater ocean noise data that I used in my study. Now that I had the raw acoustic data from all these 7 global ocean observatories, I needed a methodology to be able to extract the noise caused by anthropogenic activity. So I used a 5-step methodology. First, I downloaded all the raw audio files from the different stations. And this was, as many of you who have worked with real data can understand, it's very messy and not very organized. So I had to first pre-process all this data and index them for each station. And these were coming at many different sample rates, down from 16 kilohertz up to 48 kilohertz. So my second step was to resample all my hydrophone data to 2 kilohertz. 2 kilohertz is the Nyquist frequency to measure underwater noise up to the 1 kilohertz band. And that is the region which I was interested in. So I split up my data into 1-minute segments and applied fast Fourier transformations to each segment to obtain the power spectral densities or the frequency components of my data. Then in the third step, I aggregated all these boxes together to create long-term spectral averages, which would show me the power of different frequencies over time. Finally, to eliminate the effect that wind speed has on underwater sound, I only compared days with similar sea states on the Beaufort scale. Finally, to understand the band in which anthropogenic activity is present, I calculated the geometric means, medians, and quantiles of sound in 3rd octave bands centered on 63 Hz, 125 Hz, and the 1 kilohertz band, and compared them during the COVID-19 pandemic to previous years. Now, my whole methodology was very, analysis heavy. So there were several libraries that I used while conducting my research. To pre-process the data, it was very helpful to use Pandas and Excel since I had over 5 terabytes of ocean noise data. to do the actual analysis of ocean sound, I did this all in Python using open source libraries like SciPy, NumPy, and Matplotlib visualization. And I always think that it's important to express the results of studies into an interactive web app that public communities can interact and understand. So I created a web dashboard and used Plotly, Dash, GitHub, and Python Anywhere to create and host my web app for the project. So into the results from my analysis. My results were actually very interesting. So my first result, we know that wind has effect on underwater noise. However, after analyzing data from several of my stations, I found that the correlation between wind speed and ocean noise is minimal at 63 Hz and 125 Hz, as you can see on the graphs on the top. Whereas at the higher frequencies of 500 and above, the wind has a significant correlation with underwater noise. Now, in my study, I was looking at the lower frequency noise. However, to remove that last minimal impact that wind speed may have on the underwater noise, I only compared month to month in my analysis. And this would remove any seasonal fluctuations in wind speed from my data. Second, even within my monthly data, I only use days with a similar state on the Beaufort scale. So the Beaufort scale is an empirical scale that relates wind speed to observed ocean conditions. So when doing my analysis, I only kept days with a Beaufort scale of 1 to 4 to assure that the changes I'm seeing in underwater noise is majorly and only caused by the anthropogenic activity. My second result was even interesting. So after cleaning my data, I'm comparing the underwater noise levels during the lockdowns to previous years. I found that ocean noise had decreased at all the stations in my study during that period. The average decrease was by 4.5 decibels. The highest decrease was seen at Georgia Strait in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of Canada. And this decrease was pretty significant also because it was located near the port of Vancouver, which is the third largest port in North America. The second largest decrease was seen at Untitled Chapter in the South Pacific off the coast of New Zealand, around 6 decibels. I also calculated the 25% exceedance levels of my data. Essentially, this means a threshold above which 25% of the noise levels were found. And these thresholds decreased by 5.5 decibels. So this showed the decrease in noise that was seen during the pandemic was mostly caused by the louder noises from ships. And these dips in exceedance levels coincided with the dip caused by the COVID-19 restrictions on passenger and cruise traffic. I also wanted to make sure that the decrease I was seeing in underwater noise was actually caused by a decrease in shipping traffic. So many of you may know that ships are fit with AIS transponders, which track the positions of ships in the oceans. So here, for example, in Georgia Strait, I have the AIS ship mapping data for April 2019 versus April 2020. And it's very clear that shipping traffic has greatly decreased during 2020. Similarly, in Glacier Bay, which is pretty interesting because Glacier Bay has a lot of cruise ship traffic. And because the cruise industry pretty much plummeted during the pandemic, you can see that there's virtually no traffic in 2020. Finally, in Stellwagen as well, which has a lot of recreational and a lot of commercial shipping, it also decreased. So all these decreases in shipping traffic coincided with the decreases found by my study in underwater noise. It also showed that areas that had multiple sources of shipping traffic, like Georgia Strait, which had shipping traffic from commercial shipping, tourist vessels, and so on, experienced a much larger decrease than other stations. So this is one of my favorite parts of my study, because while looking through my data, I was able to identify different sounds caused by marine mammals. And unfortunately, as you can see, they clearly overlap with the sounds caused by shipping traffic. So I've prepared a short video here. So this video shows sounds from different marine mammals as well as anthropogenic noise. First, you will hear the loud, jarring noise from shipping traffic. It's very clear that this has been artificially induced into the ocean. Then it will show the whistles of dolphins. Dolphins are social creatures and use whistles for communication. Then you'll hear the echolocation clicks of marine mammals. Echolocation clicks are short bursts or pulses of sound that marine mammals use to understand their environment. So it'll be a bit loud, but I hope you enjoy the video.
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. So I hope you both gain a bit of a better idea of the sounds underwater and how shipping affects the sound so much. So in conclusion, my research was able to correctly monitor the effects of anthropogenic noise on ocean noise levels, as it was able to measure this decrease in ocean noise during the COVID-19 pandemic. Another interesting aspect of this project is that since the COVID-19 pandemic originated in China, the first trade routes to be affected are the Pacific shipping routes. And clearly you can see in this diagram that the stations located in the Pacific Ocean were the first to experience a decrease in ocean noise. This was followed by closing the trade routes in the Atlantic, and ocean noise in the Atlantic decreased next. The last decrease was seen in Glacier Bay and Cambridge Bay. And this is because these locations are often frequented by summer cruise traffic. So the decrease was only seen in the summer months as expected. So this really shows that these strategic anthropauses are actually effective methods of decreasing underwater noise. So in the future, main recommendation from this research would be that moving shipping lanes and moratoria on new ones, especially in the Arctic, as sea ice is melting due to climate change, these kind of strategies can really help to reduce underwater noise and help to reverse the decline in the marine mammal population. Now, I've created a web app, monitormyocean.com. And this web app shows underwater noise levels from anthropogenic activity up to the 1 kilohertz. And this is in alignment with the European Union's Marine Strategy Framework Directive. And Canada and US are expected to follow in their footsteps later this year. All the code is open source. And as Amir mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, my web app has also been endorsed as a UN Ocean Decade activity, as 2021 to 2030 is the UN Decade for Oceans for Sustainable Development. So now I will be giving you a short demo of my web app. All right, awesome. So this is a web app, Monitor My Ocean. So first you can see on the left are all the different locations used in my study. So for example, if we were to pick Monterey Bay in the Pacific Ocean, the first thing you will see is the quantile analysis for ocean noise during the COVID-19 pandemic. So you can see it's pretty clear that during the months of the pandemic, ocean noise decreased significantly compared to both previous and subsequent years. Wind speed is also shown on my web app, as I talked about, the importance of wind speed in reducing external noise from wind in my analysis was also really important. And finally, I even plot the individual noise levels for each day. So policymakers will be able to use my web app to monitor quiet ocean noise strategies that will be coming up in the future. So feel free to go to this website on your own and check out the different locations in my study. And if you would like to learn more, you can also check out any of the other pages. So now, another thing that was mentioned is that I attended the UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, Portugal last week. So this is a really interesting experience, and a big thank you to the World Ocean Networks, because I was able to win the WO and EU Youth for Ocean Award for my research. And this got me invited to attend this conference. This conference was basically organized by the governments of Kenya and the governments of Portugal. The main theme of this conference was stocktaking on the achievements that countries had done regarding regulations or mandates that were proposed earlier, and also thinking of different solutions and reviewing on the SDG 14 life below water goals. There were two zones in this conference: the blue zone, in which there were UN and intergovernmental discussions, and then was the more interesting green zone. And these were populated by civil societies and youths and discussed and dialogued on several different topics. I myself participated in several side events on ocean noise, deep sea mining, on ocean literature, on the ocean decade, as well as early career ocean professionals. So the main outcome from this conference was 300 voluntary commitments and a $1 billion investment for marine protected areas. And it also was the adoption of the Lisbon Declaration. Now, I went and analyzed the Lisbon Declaration, which talked about different measures and for saving the ocean. So this word cloud here shows the main themes or ideas discussed in this declaration. So you can see they have the right idea. We've mentioned climate change, sustainable development, oceanic ecosystem approaches, marine transportation, sustainable development. However, there are some words missing in the declaration. There were almost no mentions of youths or the finances or laws required to actually enforce these themes that were discussed. In further analysis into this declaration, there's a target SDG 14.1, and this talks about being able to significantly reduce marine pollution of all kinds. And this includes underwater noise. So it definitely aligns with my research. Even further, in a certain paragraph or section of this declaration, it even states itself, preventing and reducing anthropogenic underwater noise. A few other themes that were discussed specifically in other parts of the declaration was being able to strengthen open access to this data, youth involvement, and strengthening the bridge between science and policymaking. So this very strongly, works with my project, Monitor My Ocean, since I'm a youth, and my project aims to bridge, the distance between ocean noise analysis and policymaking for this. As a first-time attendee of a UN conference, there were a few main concerns that I had after attending this week-long event. First, all the commitments made by countries and governments in the conference were voluntary and were not enforceable, which means that countries don't have very much incentive to actually achieve these goals. And this was made very clear because there was a major failure to achieve even the modest goals set in 2015, which included the conservation of just 10% of oceanic regions. Second, there was no comprehensive law or strategy that was discussed to protect oceans in international waters, because many countries like Canada, for example, and Europe have very strong policies regarding their national waters. But they fail to have proper laws to govern things like deep sea mining in international waters. And there was also a major lack of youths that were speaking at the conference. Thank you. I'd be happy to answer any questions about my research or my experience at the conference.
Okay, so there are a few questions here. Let's see. Let's go to the top here. how many years of pre-pandemic 2022 data were available and how many were subsequently used in the analysis? What was the temporal frequency of the wind speed acoustic data?
Great. Thank you, Joanne, for your question. So in terms of the historic data that I used for my analysis, it varied from station to station. So in some stations, I was able to get 2 or 3 years of historic data, as well as 1 year of data after the pandemic in 2021. However, due to the COVID-19 restrictions, it was very difficult for many stations to be able to be serviced and the data to be retrieved from. There wasn't data from 2021 in many of the stations, and for some of the stations, there was only 1 or 2 years of historical data. So I just gathered as much as was possible to make my analysis as robust as possible. So temporal frequency, in terms temporal frequency of the wind speed accuracy data. So the frequency of wind speeds is dominant above 100 hertz. So as was seen in one of my slides, the correlation at over 500 hertz is very significant. So at 2 or 3 kilohertz, and even up to 48 kilohertz, wind still plays a very strong impact on underwater noise levels. And in the main study, I only focused between 0 to 1 kilohertz, since that was the frequencies of interest for my research.
Okay, so next question is by Claire Perry. And the question is, I wonder if one could now study whether some marine mammals may have migrated to regions more distant from shipping noise following the return of the marine traffic with the lifting of the COVID restriction in the regions such as Georgia Strait.
Thank you, Claire. That's an excellent question. So ocean noise, as mentioned, has detrimental effects on marine mammals, as it causes hearing loss. And several studies have shown that in the presence of ocean noise, whales are less successful at capturing prey, and it's much difficult for them to be heard with their other members of their population. So there definitely would have been less stress on the marine mammal ecosystem during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, several restrictions, as in Georgia Strait, still remain and remained earlier this year. So it's difficult to say and to predict the movement of marine mammals at this moment, but as I continue my research, I'll be also focusing more on the different changes that were occurred in the behavior of marine mammals during the COVID-19 restrictions.
Okay, the next question is by David Greenberg, and let's see, just one. Do you know how far away your sound sources are? Could any of your hydrophones be hearing the same sound?
Good question. Let me pull up the map from there. So as can be seen here, the distances, these hydrophones are pretty well spread out around the globe. However, you can see that there are a lot more, for example, on the Pacific coast of North America. And these hydrophones can detect underwater ambient noise from hundreds of kilometers away. And shipping routes also may traverse several hydrophones that were used in the study. So I do think these hydrophones were pretty far apart. However, since shipping routes cross multiple of these locations, it is possible that there was some overlap in the noise levels from ships that were detected via multiple hydrophones.
All right, the next question is about Jesse Esselbowl. Okay, what are your thoughts about quality of training data set to allow AI to recognize kinds of marine noise, such as anthropogenic and natural?
That's a great question, and one that I've definitely been looking into recently. So I've been building up my expertise in PAMGuard, which is a software that's able to use different algorithms to detect anthropogenic and noise from whales and dolphins. Now, I think in terms of AI, gathering a sample data set is very important. And while AI has definitely been used to detect noise from different marine mammals, it's very difficult to be able to use it to detect certain features from different whales. For example, identifying the age of a marine mammal, or how many are there? Because gathering training data in an uncontrolled environment isn't very easy. So there's a lot of ongoing research that's focusing on using AI for bioacoustics. So I think that right now the training data sets are not very widely available and are not very, they don't encompass all oceanic regions. Because another big issue is that many of these hydrophones are placed on the coasts of areas like North America and Europe. And there's a serious lack of data from regions like the southern coast of Africa or South America, in which whale populations are also very present. So I don't think the quality of these data sets are very diverse at the moment, but as research keeps going on, I think there's a definite window for using AI in a larger field of bioacoustics.
Okay, so next question is by Jay Gabon. And he said, wonderful start to tackle anthropogenic sources of underwater noise. Perhaps consider ways to modify anthropogenic noise so that it is minimized or transmits in different frequency ranges and doesn't interfere with marine life.
For sure. Well, thank you, Jay Gavin. So underwater noise from ships is mainly caused by a process called propeller cavitation, in which the propellers of a boat spin at such a speed that it decreases the boiling point of water, which creates steam and creates bubbles of steam that when they leave this low pressure area, explode, causing a great amount of underwater noise. Now, in military technology like submarines, they're already able to minimize this noise by having different propeller designs, like having multiple wings on each propeller, which means that you need to rotate them less fast to achieve the same amount of thrust. However, these types of technologies are very expensive to implement at the moment. But in the future, even in the near-term future, this is in the best interests of shipping companies, because the less amount of pollution that's generated by these ships means a higher efficiency and lower cost in the long term. So as underwater noise becomes a more research issue and being more recognized, then more of these designs can be built, and this will lower the cost of these kind of designs that minimize underwater noise. So hopefully in the near future, we will to see better propeller designs in these ships to minimize the influence that ships have on noise levels.
All right, another question by Joan, and it says, how frequently was the wind data sampled? Every hour, for example, or was it more of a continuous sampling? Example, every second. Similarly for the acoustic data.
Yeah.
The frequency of data.
I see. Yes, so I collected data from wind buoys, and I took daily averages for the wind speeds in my data. And the reason that I didn't take hourly samples was for a few different reasons. But the main reason is that the source of noise from wind, basically wind creates waves, and the breaking of these waves leads to underwater noise. However, it takes a significant amount of time. So you can't just have a burst of wind that creates a lot of waves. You need to have continuous wind for several hours to get bigger waves that cause underwater noise. So taking 1 hour of sampling frequency would not make much sense. So I thought that a 1-day sample for the wind speed would lead to the most accurate understanding of sea state.
Okay, so I don't see any more questions, but I have one question, and that is in your app that you have designed, Monitor My Ocean. Are you planning to increase the sites where you will be monitoring these frequencies?
Absolutely. I firmly believe that ocean noise is a global issue, which means we need to have monitoring systems all around the world, especially in developing countries where these strategies might not be as prevalent. So I'm already working on finding lower cost hydrophones to put in different areas of the globe. And we'll definitely be expanding the amount of hydrophones that I'm monitoring in my web app. So if anyone in the audience has knows any hydrophone data that I haven't included in my research, then I'd be happy to take a look at it and incorporate it into my research.
All right, another question by Jay Gabon. Have you solicited sound data from other countries, manufacturers, to add to your website?
So I've took the sound data sets for all the open hydrophones that I was able to find by reaching out to organizations and researchers. So companies and manufacturers that may record underwater noise do not share this data, since they like to use it for their personal achievements and success and so on. So they don't obviously like to share this data with researchers and so on. However, governments of certain countries, like in US, the NOAA obviously has made a lot of sound data open source. So I will be reaching out to other countries and companies to understand whether they have open sound data. But I think that instead of looking at these noise data sets from companies and manufacturers, it's best to have open data, since this makes it so that everyone has access and everyone can perform research and use this data for the betterment of society.
Okay, so I don't see any more questions. So any final thoughts before we end the seminar? I think you're doing a fantastic work at a very young age, I might add. So I'd like to thank you, Artash, for a wonderful seminar, and also the participant who tuned in. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure speaking here. Thank you to CMOS for inviting me here, and thank you to the audience for coming to my presentation.
Thanks. Thanks, Artash.